Hi, my name is Christoph Kian, and I help people with the naturalization process in Switzerland. One question that often comes up is about the interview questions. So I created this video, and you can get an impression about the interview questions. And if you have any additional questions, please post them in the comments below. There are around 120 questions that are the core questions for the interview. It might be good to know a few more, like 150, but it's not more than that.
And who is asking the questions?
That depends on your community, how many people there are in the commission. I have seen between 3 and 14. 14 is quite a lot, but usually depending on the size of your community, I would expect 3 to 7 people in the commission.
And how are the questions organized?
So they're usually organized according to topics. So you have these 5 topics about the basic knowledge of Switzerland. And it usually starts off with the personal questions about your motivation. And a short introduction is usually at the start of the conversation. So we have these 5 areas. The first one is the personal questions, then geography, politics, society, history of Switzerland. These are the 5 areas. Can you say it again?
What kind of things are they asking in the personal questions?
So the personal question is usually about your motivations, or why do you want to become Swiss? And then they test with questions your level of integration. They will ask if you're a member of some association or how you have contact with Swiss people. But that's one of the core questions: is why do you want to become Swiss? And the other one is, are you a member of a Swiss organization?
What if I'm not a member of an association?
Well, you don't want to say no. You want to say no, but you want to say, I'm not a member of an association, but I am active in this kind of event or organization that is probably not an association, but you want to show your interaction with Swiss people and Swiss society in some way. So even if your answer is no to the question, if you're a member of an association, you still want to explain how you or talk about your level of integration.
How deep are these questions? How deep do they go? How much detail do they want?
When you apply for citizenship, you will get a lot of material from your community or from the canton, and it's usually more than you need to know. So what you need to know is the basic knowledge, and usually they start with one question, and then with one topic. Let's say they ask something about the Swiss Parliament, and then there might be 1 or 2 follow-up questions, but they usually don't go too deep. So you have to describe, or you have to give definitions. What is the Swiss Parliament, for example, when you define the Parliament? And the follow-up question might be about the core processes in the Parliament.
And what happens if I don't know the answer to a question?
Well, I often see people like commenting in forums like, I didn't know, I didn't pass the interview because I didn't know one answer to one question. I don't think that's true, because overall it's an impression that the commission gets from you. Are you prepared? Are you well integrated? And it's an overall impression. Even if you miss 1 or 2 questions, it shouldn't be a problem. However, you want to leave the impression that you have the basic knowledge and that you are able to express it in one of the official languages in Switzerland. In this case, it's usually German.
So are there any answers that I want to avoid?
Yes, in the area of personal questions, what they want to hear is that you are active, or that you want to become an active participant of Swiss politics. So this is something you have to say. On the other hand, you shouldn't say that you want to become Swiss because it's a very good passport to have for traveling. That's not a valid reason for citizenship. And the interview might be finished if you give this answer. So don't say that, even if it's one reason for you.
But coming back to the language questions, so is it like a language test?
And now the interview is not a language test anymore, so you have to prove your language level in a certification that you have to go to an official test before you apply, and then you show in the application that you have the required level. However, you have to be able to communicate in the interview on the required level. So you have to understand the questions, you have to give appropriate answers, and you have to interact with the commission. And that's often challenging on the level that is required, B1. That might be a challenging situation, especially when you think about the high pressure that that situation creates for people. It's a test situation. It's a conversation, but it's also a test situation. And often for many people, it's just the first time they speak in German in front of a commission, and there's a lot at stake. So that if you can't perform well, they will tell you, and you have to wait for 1 or 2 more years and come back with a higher level of German.
And do I need to know Swiss German?
No, Swiss German is not a requirement. However, in some communities, they will ask, or one person or 2 people from the commission will ask something in Swiss German or with a strong accent. But you don't need to know Swiss German. You don't. It's good if you understand some, but it's not required. I mean, German or Schriftdeutsch is the standard language in the interview.
And how did you get to the questions?
I collected the questions from my clients. In the past years, I worked with dozens of clients and helped them with this interview process. And every time they had their interview, I reached out to them and asked them about the questions that were asked. And for a year or 2 years now, I only ask about were there any surprises in the interview, any surprise questions? And usually the answer is no. So that's good. That means the list is complete. Sometimes there is one question that is not on the list, but that's very rare.
So is there one major challenge that comes up over and over when we talk about the interview questions?
Yeah, I think one of the major challenges is that people have the impression if they have the knowledge about Switzerland, that's enough, but there's a gap between having the knowledge and talking about the knowledge in a foreign language. In this case, it's German. So you may be an expert in the knowledge about Switzerland that you have. If you can't express it in German in an appropriate way in the interview, this is a challenge. And I think it's often underestimated because people are very well prepared. They know a lot about Switzerland, much more than they need to know. But when it comes to expressing that knowledge, that's a huge gap often because it's an isolated learning situation where they study the stuff that they need to know or the materials they get and they know it. But expressing it in German is a different matter. That's why we focus in our work on that you know the knowledge on the one side, the knowledge you need to know, but also expressing that knowledge in German and the interaction in the interview itself. I think this was the last one, right? If you have any additional questions, please post them in the comments below.